You're now listening to the Adiel Gorel Show. Each episode, I'll bring you the latest news from my discussions with top health and wellness experts so that you can bring yourself into better health. Today, on the Adiel Gorel Show.
What is it that can shift our circadian clock in the wrong direction at night? It's brightness. Bright light of any color could shift our circadian rhythm in the wrong direction. Also blue and green light, because those high frequency lights are present in the sun during the day.
Hi, everybody. It's a joy to have you here with us today. I'm very excited because we have a speaker about a subject that could be very useful for all of us, for all our health and lives. We have Roudy Nassif, and he's going to be talking to us about light and the effect that various lights on the spectrum have on our health, sleeping in darkness versus not. Many of those super critical things. We talk about air, we talk about food, we talk about what we drink, but sometimes we need to talk about that. It's just as important, if not more, light. So without further ado, Roudy, it's a joy to have you on the call with us.
Thanks for the intro, Adiel, and I'm so enthused to be here today.
Great. So, why don't we begin with your own story? I mean, with light, how did you start your company called VivaRays? And tell us just about how you got here.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've always told people that my actual story started when I was a little kid, being diagnosed with ADHD as a child. I suffered from headaches, agitation, and inability to focus. And growing up, I turned into a night owl, staying up very late, feeling super wired and stimulated every single night, to then wake up the following morning feeling exhausted, fatigued, and completely depressed. And eventually, day after day, this led me to deep depression, chronic fatigue, and complete disorientation. And it was really sabotaging my professional life, my aspirations, and even my relationship with my loved ones. And I was looking for a solution in order to feel better. However, I honestly felt extremely tired and exhausted going from one holistic doctor to another, and very overwhelmed with all the different health opinions about what I should be doing. And as I kept trying all these different diets, taking different herbal formulas and supplements, as well as trying different meditation techniques and physical exercise techniques, and while all of these positively influenced my life, I was unfortunately still stuck with feeling wired and stimulated at night, and depressed and completely fatigued the following day. Now, miraculously, one specific event changed all of this. I spent several weeks on a rural farm in Quebec camping, and I was exposed only to natural light during the day and fire and candlelight during the evening. Now, within a matter of 3 days, something miraculous happened. For the first time in my life, I was able to wind down in the evening. I slept shortly after the sunset, to then wake up before the sunrise, literally feeling energized, rested, and completely motivated. I was in complete awe because that was magic to me after 25 years of suffering. And I was actually farming outdoors all day, dancing, cooking, hiking, swimming in lakes, and studying. And to be honest, I was achieving in a 24-hour period more than I would in a month, literally. And that literally blew my mind. Now, the magic didn't last very long, because unfortunately, when I moved back from the farm to the city, and at the time I was still living in Toronto, and within a matter of few weeks, I fell back into my old terrible routine of staying up late and waking up feeling depressed and chronically fatigued again. And at this point, I sat with myself and I was contemplating, how is that possible? And I remember asking myself a very important question that changed my life. And I said, is it possible that my light environment was the cause of all of this? And this question led me to a 7-year journey where I was studying quantum physics, quantum biology, circadian rhythm, and light. And I started consulting the world's leading expert in this field. And what I actually learned is that we are light beings, and that our physical reality is but condensed light that is vibrating at a lower speed. And this means that not only light shapes and molds every aspect of our well-being, but it is the nucleus of life itself. And the quality of the light that you expose yourself to will determine the quality of your mood, your sleep, productivity, focus, and well-being. And the problem is that in our modern world, we're getting exposed to very little natural light during the day, and we are being bombarded by junk artificial light from LED bulbs, screens, and devices. So at this point, when I realized this, I was desperately looking for a solution. And I discovered back then about blue blocking glasses. And that was the first trigger of how I started VivaRays.
Well, that's very congruent with what Chad and I have been experiencing. We had many interviews with experts in the field of sound healing, vibrations. We talked about the logic that makes, because we ourselves, if you go to the lower level of what we are nothing but electromagnetic frequencies. That's what we are, of which light is also, one. So, I mean, clearly, like, sound can heal us very, very clearly, very obviously. Light can also heal us. In fact, I will even ask you a question that's even on the side of this. There was an experiment done in a sleep lab, I don't remember the details, where they let a person sleep in a completely darkened room. They hooked them up to all the electrodes, as you do, and then completely dark, in the middle of the night, they took a tiny flashlight and shone it on the back of the person's knee, far from the eyes. All the electrode jumps and everything changed. So, I mean, it seems like it's not only the eyes. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. And I was having a discussion after I heard Dr. Andrew Huberman. He's a neuroscientist, and he was talking about some of those experiments. And I referred back to one of my mentors, a person whom I learned from a lot, is called Dr. Samer Hattar, is a circadian expert. And up until now, there's no one study that I've seen that shows the effect of light on our circadian rhythm from a non-ocular perspective, which means through the skin versus the eyes. And I was actually reading that study about the light that has been shown on the back of the knee. And Dr. Andrew Huberman was disregarding this study, and he said that it was disregarded after because there has been some flaws in how the studies has been put together. And to my knowledge, and based on the latest conversation that I've been having, there is no evidence whatsoever that light could have any impact on our circadian rhythm through our skin yet. And in this conversation, Dr. Samer Hattar shared something very interesting that, I don't know if you know, but a serpent, for instance, they have a hole in their skull, and it's through this hole that serpents absorb light frequency so that they could know about the time of the day, influencing their circadian clock. And we're talking how for human beings, it's this two holes or hollow spaces that are called our eyes, which are the windows through which light enters and activates our circadian clock in the hypothalamus.
But I still go to the point of, like, certainly we know that infrared light, which is not even visible to the eye, does have an effect on the body because it penetrates, and light is energy. Definitely. So when you penetrate with some energy, obviously things can happen. But still, let's just go. One of the things you say is our light diet is at least as important as our food diet. But can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, definitely. I just want to make something very clear that what I'm referring to is the ocular effect is on circadian rhythm. However, light has phenomenal effects through the skin, but not directly on circadian rhythm, but on a lot of different biological processes, such as vitamin D and so on.
Yeah, thanks for making that distinction.
Totally. So let's talk a little bit about light nutrition. I think, you know, as you said, like most people nowadays in our world still think that light is not that big of a deal, because I think they perceive it as something superficial that makes vision possible. However, it's much more profound, powerful, and influential than this. And I like to refer always to what Albert Einstein taught us about light, which he did phenomenal work that hasn't been 100% integrated in the field of medicine yet. And through the law of relativity, E equal mc squared, E being light, M being mass, and C velocity, Albert Einstein is telling us that light and matter are exactly the same thing. And that our physical reality is light that is vibrating at a lower speed. And this literally means that everything around you at this moment, including you and the planet itself, comes from the light and was once light and is profoundly influenced by light. I mean, every morning I pause as I'm watching the sunrise and I literally contemplate the beauty of this equation. And one of my other mentors, Dr. Jack Roos, has taught me how light entering the eyes, it hits the cornea in the eye and it slows down. And at this point, it is through this light that we're being recreated with new life every single day. Our brain cells, our tissues, our heart, and the rest of our organs are being regenerated with this light energy. And this is not philosophy. This is literally quantum physics. And for me, I personally didn't know that. As I kept suffering with my health and kept going from one doctor to another, every holistic doctor that I've seen was very concerned about my food diet and micronutrients. And no one ever asked me about my light diet. And you know, I learned from so many different mentors, but one of the concepts is just like different foods that enter our mouth have different nutritional values. Also, different frequencies of light entering our eyes and shining on our skin have also different nutritional values and healing effects. And for instance, there's a guy, he's a biochemist called Dr. Albert Gorel, and he won the Nobel Prize back in the 1937, discovering that many of the enzymes and the hormones in our body that are involved with metabolism and digesting foods are actually activated by frequencies of light, so much so that they become 500% more effective. And I mean, that's enormous. Like, what would we do if we had 5 times the energy that we usually have, or that if we start eating 5 times less the food that we usually eat because we're absorbing it more efficiently? And from this study, a lot of other studies came showing how all the substances that we ingest from food, like vitamins, minerals, have a maximum wavelength absorption. And in other words, this means that those substances are being absorbed fully by the body, or for them to be able to be absorbed fully, they require interaction with specific frequencies of light to get fully metabolized.
I'm going back to what you said before about, you know, the Albert, Einstein formula, the studies. Just to say it one more time, because you said it, I think it's very profound. I want to say it again just to make it land. Everything is a frequency. Everything is electromagnetic waves, or light, if you will. And so even our physical bodies, or the microphone right here, is really just lower frequency light manifesting as a microphone or as a laptop. So, I mean, we all are. And so that would make so much sense that light would have a huge effect, you know, on our physiology, just like food. So now you talk about our mitochondria, which of course are, you know, the power plants of our cells. Can you talk about the mitochondria and how it's affected by light?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the mitochondria is literally the power engine in our cell that burn the food that we eat, and produce energy in the form of ATP, as well as a special type of water called deuterium depleted water. And those are used by the cells and the organs for metabolic functions and optimal health and well-being. So in a nutshell, the better our mitochondria is working, the more ATP and deuterium depleted water it produces, and the more energy we have to carry out optimal daily functions, from thinking to creating to digesting, even sleeping and healing at night requires energy. So it has recently come to light that not only those mitochondria are energy producers, but they play an absolutely essential role in sensing what is going on in our environment and mediating communication between the environment and the cell. And one of the most important information that we've relied on as humans throughout millions of years of evolution is actually light. And technically, for the past 1.5 billion years, these mitochondria evolved to get these light waves from sunlight, which increases in intensity from sunrise to solar noon, just like a crescendo of musical scale, and then starts to decrease and gradually fade away, descending down the musical scale and transitioning into the complete darkness of the night. And this literally enabled our mitochondria to orient themselves to day or night, and even to the time of the season, and therefore optimizing their functioning to either optimal wakefulness or to sleep and repair. Okay, and this optimal wakefulness and productivity signal that we receive through light into our cells is actually activated by our exposure to bright sunlight in the morning. We literally need to be exposed to the gradually increasing color temperature in light, which means the inclining blue and green light frequency in the morning. Right. So yeah, so similar to how the inclining blue and green light frequency in the morning sunlight activate this mechanism so that we're awake, we're productive, we're creative, there's a similar mechanism that activates optimal sleep. And this relies on our eyes witnessing the declining blue and green light frequencies around sunset and getting this signal of darkness, that it's getting dark outside. And technically our body receives those signals through our eyes. And this is why it's very important to actually watch the sunset or be outside and witness this slowly fading light, and then block all artificial light afterwards so that our brain is not being confused again into thinking it's daytime.
Yeah, I mean, so, darkness clearly has an effect on the mitochondria. I assume it's going to have an effect on healing. And also, just to go logically from what you say, it seemed like we should really sleep in a completely dark room, right?
Yes, definitely. That's a great question. And technically, we talked about how mitochondria produce energy. We talked about how mitochondria play a phenomenal role in mediating communication between the environment and the cell. Other than this, also our mitochondria play an important role in two very important processes within every cell, autophagy and apoptosis. Now, autophagy means cellular cleaning, just like a dishwasher would. And apoptosis means cellular replacement and death, just like you would replace the oil for your car's engine, for instance. And every night while we sleep, we are meant to clean ourselves here and rejuvenate. And this can only happen at night in complete darkness, after our eyes receiving the right signal that it is getting dark outside. And cells that cannot undergo autophagy and apoptosis develop tumor, they lose efficiency, and they lead to all kind of neurodegenerative disease and chronic disease. Now, the problem is that 95% of people in our modern world are not getting the darkness that their body needs. And their mitochondria are continuously being confused by the wrong signals from artificial light day and night. And this means that even though they think that they are getting good night's sleep, they're not actually getting a good night's sleep on a cellular level, because they're waking up every morning feeling burnt out and dirty on a cellular level. And eventually, day after day, as these cells are not able to clean themselves and replace themselves, the mitochondria start losing efficiency, and people start going into inflammation, and this technically leads to all kinds of chronic diseases. There's a scientist called from the University of Washington called Dr. Wallace. He literally won the Nobel Prize, showing that almost 90% of our modern chronic diseases are originating in the mitochondrial genome rather than the nuclear genome. So simply by allowing the mitochondria to connect with the light and dark cycles, by enhancing our light exposure during the day, and by blocking all artificial light after the sunset, we can start maximizing what these mitochondria do best, which is energy production during the day and repair and healing at night. And it needs to happen in complete darkness.
Okay, so let's talk about what complete darkness means. I started to hear about all of this about 15 years ago. And one of the things I did is I jumped and I made my bedroom dark. When I made it completely dark, I realized, well, now my doors to the bedroom become light sources, the faint thing from the seam at the door. So I said, look, I could seal the doors also, but if I have to wake up at night, maybe I have to go to the bathroom, it starts to be a pain. So I left them. So, I mean, what extent of complete darkness is complete darkness?
Definitely. That's actually a wonderful question. And there's probably some misunderstanding around what getting a dark signal means. Now, from a circadian perspective, getting a dark signal means that melanopsin ganglion cells, those light proteins in the eye that connect to our circadian clock, are actually waiting to witness the slowly fading light around sunset. So the decline in the blue and green light frequencies, followed by darkness. Okay, so technically the position at which the sun is moving, okay, is very important, because the sun is going to be moving from a higher angle to a lower angle, and the color temperature is going to be moving from a higher color temperature to a lower color temperature. Now, there is a third aspect also that influences our circadian clock. The brightness is going to be moving from higher brightness to lower brightness. So all of these three signals are very important signals that for our eyes to witness in order to start a lot of the rejuvenating and repairing mechanism in an efficient way later at night. So it's not only about blocking all light and making it super dark in the room. It's more so about witnessing the slowly fading light around sunset and then transitioning into a dark environment. Now, what is a dark environment? When, you know, if the moon is up and it's a full moon, okay, there's gonna be light coming from that full moon. Is it gonna affect our sleep? The question is, there's no evidence that is gonna affect our circadian rhythm. There are a lot of evidence. Yeah, so the point I'm making is getting the dark signal does not merely means making the room extremely dark. It means witnessing the sunset and then transitioning into a relatively dark environment that is not high in the blue and green light frequencies. Now, what does affect, what is it that can shift our circadian clock in the wrong direction at night? It's brightness. Bright light of any color could shift our circadian rhythm in the wrong direction. Also blue and green light, because those high frequency light are present in the sun during the day. So technically we don't necessarily want to go so crazy about it, but we want to make sure that there's not much bright light in our environment. If we're turning on lights, it's better to have lights that are closer to the floor rather than overhead lights. And this is because the proteins in the eyes, melanopsin, are actually concentrated in the lower bottom half of the retina. And because of the anatomy of the eye, there's a lens in front of the retina. And because of the nature of optic, there's an inversion that happens, which means that those melanopsin in the bottom half of the eye are entrained to perceive overhead lighting, and they are stimulated by overhead lighting. And this makes sense because sunlight is overhead. Now, how can we turn this into something practical? It simply means that it's better to put the light lower on the floor at night. And we want to have light with very low brightness. And we want to have lights that are free of blue and green light. And this is also why in VivaRays, we've engineered glasses that exactly filter out the blue and green light frequency and also decrease the brightness of light, because there's another aspect that so many people don't pay attention to, but it turns out that bright light of any color, even if it's red, could also shift your circadian clock in the wrong direction.
I see. So, so junk blue light, meaning blue light that we get when we don't want it, like for example, from our laptop, from our, iPad, phone, how does it cause damage to the mitochondria, causes inflammation, etc.?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what blue light does to our mitochondria, it lowers our redox potential. Now, what is redox potential? Technically, all food that we eat is broken down into subatomic light particles called electrons and protons. And electrons have a negative charge, while protons have a positive charge, okay? And the ability of the engine in our cells, the mitochondria, to separate the positive from the negative, produce ATP and deuterium depleted water is called redox, okay? And the higher our redox potential, the healthier we are and the more energy we have. You can also think of the redox potential as what people refer to as chi or prana. And the higher the chi or the prana in your body, the more aliveness and the more vitality you have overall. Now, the mitochondrial electron transport chain is what separates the negative from the positive, okay? And across the inner membrane of the mitochondria. And those electrons that come from food and come from sun and come from the earth are used by 5 pumps in the mitochondria that line up together, and they start vibrating and oscillating. And through this vibration, they push those electrons in between each other. And they literally create an electric field in the mitochondria to generate ATP. And this literally brings us to a new understanding of the body, which is from biochemicals and molecules to looking at the body as the body electric living in an electric universe. And there's a guy called Robert Becker who wrote a phenomenal book called The Body Electric, which I highly recommend. But coming back to this mitochondria stuff, I want you to think of these 5 pumps in the mitochondria as 5 quantum soldiers, okay? And these quantum soldiers, they lie together and they start tossing these fireballs in between each other called electrons. And it turns out that these quantum soldiers are able to optimally toss these fireballs in between each other and generate energy when they are charged with full spectrum sunlight during the day. And these soldiers, just like us, they need rest and complete darkness at night in order to repair themselves and wake up the following morning with the energy to be able to toss these fireballs. Now, here comes the problem. As you mentioned, man-made artificial light from phones, screens, even LED bulbs in your kitchen, in your bathroom, etc., is very high in the blue and is very, very low in the orange, yellow, and red. Now, blue light in isolation from the other colors has been shown to spread these quantum soldiers apart, or those respiratory proteins in the mitochondria. Whereas yellow, orange, red light, and infrared light has been shown to bring those respiratory proteins together, okay? Now, what does that mean? In quantum physics, anytime we have an energy transfer of electrons moving across, the closer the distance the electrons need to travel, the more efficient the energy is, and the more energy we have. So I want you to imagine this. When we are chronically exposed to blue light as an isolation from all the other colors day and night, those quantum soldiers or the respiratory proteins move apart, and this makes it much harder for these guys to be able to toss these fireballs and generate energy. And when we have less energy available, we have less energy to heal and to carry out optimal daily functions. So then we start feeling foggy-headed, fatigued, depressed, and irritable. And our mitochondria also won't be able to repair themselves at night, which will cause us to sleep terribly. And we go into this vicious circle of not being able to sleep well, waking up feeling tired, and eventually running into inflammation and so on.
Stay tuned for part 2 of this interview. Thank you for joining us today. I know you love what's coming next in part 2. Be sure to click the subscribe button for more videos.